Mark A. Altman. DAREN DOCHTERMAN. Ashley Edward Miller. Three fans who became professionals and then became Treksperts. Inglorious Treksperts. Listen wherever you find podcasts or go to trekspertsplus.com.
Hey, this is Mark A. Altman.
And this is DAREN DOCHTERMAN.
And this is Ashley Miller.
And we are the Inglorious
Treksperts. And today we are boldly going. We're boldly going somewhere you may not be familiar with. We're going to the 40 acres lot, studio backlot that was owned by Desilu, where they filmed the original Star Trek pilots. And it's really fascinating. The history of 40 acres is really interesting. And to talk about it, we brought in Stephen Bingham. And Stephen was a former archivist and staff historian at Warner Brothers, but he's the author of the book Hollywood's Lost Backlot, 40 Acres of Glamour and Mystery, which is a terrific book, which only touches on Star Trek, but a terrific book about the history of the lot here in Culver City. He's also written MGM, Hollywood's Greatest Backlot, Paramount City of Dreams, Warner Brothers, Hollywood's Ultimate Backlot, and Easy Rider, 50 Years Looking for America, as well as the 50 MGM movies that transformed Hollywood. Is a terrific scholar and archivist, and we're delighted to have him joining us today. Hello, guys. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Mark.
Yeah, I'm excited about this episode. I've always been fascinated by this 40 acres backlot. A lot of it changed hands a lot and went through a lot of legendary people.
And it is in so many things that you do not realize.
Yeah. They will after they listen to this episode, I presume.
Hopefully.
Yeah. I got to tell you, speaking of lost things, I bought many years ago this gold Cylon at Tower Records. It was exclusive, one of these 12-inch gold Cylons. And it was a Tower Records exclusive. I was very happy to have it. And for years, my son has been asking me to open the gold Cylon.
Oh.
No.
And I'm like, no, it's a Tower Records exclusive. It's outlasted
Tower
Records. Yeah. So I was like, I can't do it, Sally. And finally I gave in and we opened the box.
Oh no. Was Gwyneth Paltrow's head inside?
No, the gold Cylon was in there, but it was the end of an era. I'd had this maybe, I don't know, 25 years or so. But we have this beautiful shelf, and I have to say you're going to be disappointed because I only had so much room in the display case. So we cleared out the Space 1999, the Comlock, and the Phase pistol and the Eagle to make room for the gold Cylon, the silver Cylon, and the wonderful Galactica and Cylon base stars from Eagle Moss that I fortunately acquired before they went out of business. So we have a nice Galactica shelf beneath the next to the James Bond toys, beneath the Star Trek figures and the Star Wars figures, and but it was a little hard to come to terms with the lack, opening the gold Cylon.
Yeah, I don't know how you did that. I honestly, look, part of me wants to say, you know what? I mean, who are we to judge? You're a dad. He's your son. He's asking for this thing. And yet when I put myself in your position, I can imagine myself saying, no. It's just,
well, and I don't have a lot of room now.
But you're a much nicer dad than I am.
Those Exo 6, Exo 8. XO6. I don't have a lot of room because I have this, now Kirk and Spock in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, and that's Mira Sulu, which is just a gorgeous figure, and
yes, he is,
and Mira Spock, and I have the old Khan from that was done before they became XO6 from his old company. But I'm running out of room, and I got to choose very wisely as to what I'm going to add to that shelf. But there's a dearth of a classic Star Trek, I have to say. And I just did not want Locutus. I just don't think it's that great. I mean, he did a great job, but I just don't care. If I want a Picard figure, I want it to be Captain Picard. I don't want Locutus.
Well, I can certainly take possession of those Space 1999 things if you want.
Oh, no, I moved them up to my office. I didn't get rid of them. I moved them to my office.
Or I can send an email to Jamie Anderson and see what he thinks about the whole thing, about being usurped.
Oh, you're not going to tell him I replaced Space 1999 with Galactica, are you?
You could just rotate it like a museum.
I don't want to tell him, but things happen.
Oh man, don't rat me out to Jamie Anderson. That would be. I mean, I was sort of forced into it.
You were forced.
He gave me the look. He gave me the look. He said it's time to get the Comic-Con's coming up, and let's just get the gold Cylon on the shelf, and plus the fact that I have a teenage son that's into 78 Galactica. I had to throw him a bone on this. It's like, okay, we'll do a Galactica shelf.
Put it in his room.
No, yeah, I told you at Deck 78.
So the whole thing's a lie.
He already took my Telly Savalas Blofeld to play as Lex Luthor.
Yeah, you know what?
Where it was.
You are learning the lesson about if you give a mouse a cookie, right? Like you gave the mouse a cookie, and now he wants a glass of milk, and pretty soon he's going to want a car. You don't want a mouse driving a car,
an Aston Martin DB7.
That's right.
Well,
your Aston Martin DB7
or a Knight Rider. So
that's true.
I tell you, I need a lock. I need to put a lock on the display case so he can't keep rifling through it and taking this stuff.
Too late.
That's right.
Telly Savalas is Lex Luthor. Come on.
I mean, that would have been cool.
I mean, I get it. But my James Bond shelf is for
who loves you, Soupy.
I mean, the Bond figures, those are those are pricey, nice figures. It's like, I don't know. I mean, I know he's not a huge Bond fan the way I am.
Well, I know we're a fan of the 40-acre backlot. So
we are,
and
we're going to be doing that. And part of the reason, the impetus for this, is we have just launched a new Kickstarter, which you can find at makethetrek.com, makethetrek.com, and that's your way of funding, helping us make this epic documentary about the history of Star Trek locations. Now, it's not just a travelogue with the Treksperts. We are going to be bringing in stars, writers, directors, the kind of people you're used to hearing every week on Inglorious Treksperts. And we're going to look at not just the locations, but the episodes that were filmed on these locations, as only we can, with a combination of incisive commentary and humor. And I hope the only way to make this happen is to get your support. So if you go to makethetrek.com or go to Kickstarter and check us out, and if you find it worthwhile, we hope you'll support this Kickstarter, because we are ready and raring to go. We really are excited about doing this. We're going to be announcing some of the talent that's going to be joining us, which is pretty extraordinary. Some we'll be announcing, some we can't quite tell you about yet. But there's some great Star Trek people that want to be involved, because they know if they come out with us, they will be well fed and they will have fun. They will have fun and they'll be well fed.
Food and fun and folks,
and we'll make them look good, and knowledgeable, and ask them smart questions. So we're really excited to be doing this, and by September we'll know if we have a partner or if we don't, and it's all up to you. You need to make this happen. You need to spread the word, and you know what, we understand times are tough. You can't afford to donate a lot of money, or then make a little donation, or spread the word on social. You may not be able to contribute. We get it. Doesn't mean you don't like us, but you can spread the word on social to let other people know about this very unique Kickstarter, so that we can really preserve this lost part of Star Trek history. There hasn't been a lot done on the locations, but even if you're not that interested in the locations, we're going to deal with the episodes that were filmed there. It's going to really be, to steal a phrase, fascinating. So we hope you'll join Darren, Ashley, myself, and our special guests as we boldly go where only Star Trek has gone before. Now, we're going to be joined by archivist, historian, author Steve Bingen as we go back in time to look at Hollywood's lost backlot, 40 Acres, where the original Star Trek pilots once filmed. Well, we're so excited to have Steve here today. You know, it's funny because when, you know, as a WGA member and now with SAG striking, they walk around Amazon and they have no idea the amazing history of the lot there. They pass the Tom Ince building and just have no idea the things that have filmed there. And I sit there and talk and people's eyes glaze over. But I've always been fascinated by the 40 Acres lot. And Steve wrote a fantastic book called Hollywood's Lost Backlot, all about that. And of course, many other great books like the MGM, your book on MGM, Hollywood's Greatest Backlot, a book about Paramount, Warner Brothers, Hollywood's Ultimate Backlot, Easy Rider. Which one isn't like the other? Easy Rider, 50 Years of Looking for America. Wait, America was the backlot. And we're just thrilled because, of course, the two Star Trek pilots, The Cage and Where No Man Has Gone Before, shot at 40 Acres, as did many of location shoots for Star Trek over the first 3 seasons. So, Steve, if you don't mind, can you tell us a little bit about the history of this incredible backlight lot and why it was so unique in Hollywood history?
Well, the place it wasn't associated with one particular studio. You know, ordinarily, in the case of a movie studio, you'd say the Paramount backlot or the MGM backlot, and that would define it. That would be its identity. But this place was something else entirely different. It never had a corporate identity. It never had a corporate owner that lasted for long enough to impose any sort of corporate identity on the place. And so it took on the personality of whoever happened to be there and whoever happened to be working there at that particular moment.
Right.
So, you know, MGM was just a few blocks up the road, and there would be fans standing outside the gate all day long, you know, waiting to see their favorite movie star come and go out of the gate. And they didn't know that there was another movie studio just a couple blocks up the road.
Right.
And there was nobody standing outside the gate there. You probably could have slipped the guard a 5 spot and wandered in and watched some work. And it was basically a rental lot for most of its time on Earth. Obviously, when Trek was there, it was Desilu. Yeah. And Desilu owned it, but mostly it was just a rental facility. They shot their own shows there, but they also shot anything where somebody could pay the bills. So it was an entirely different way of running a movie studio. There, you know, the makeup department at MGM up the road probably had 40 people working in it. And at the 40 Acres backlot, there was one head of the department who basically would just wheel the makeup onto the stage and let whatever TV show was shooting there apply it. So it was an entirely different way of running a movie studio, very kind of similar to how a lot of studios work today.
And I think that obviously most people are at all familiar with film. They know the storied history to an extent of the MGM backlot, which is now Sony, which is and they know obviously more stars than there were in heaven and all the great stars that went in and out of MGM, and so many great stories. What they don't know about 40 Acres is so many of the amazing films that shot there. It started as a backlot in the silent era, didn't it?
Yeah, it sure did. Cecil B. DeMille shot The King of Kings there. And years later, they shot The Greatest Story Ever Told there. George Stevens did. So you had 2 visits by Jesus at that one studio.
Well, and I love that a lot of the King of Kings sets ended up finding their way into another King movie, King Kong, for when RKO had the lot.
That's right. The Great Wall for Kong that kept Kong out was originally the temple in The King of Kings. So they basically just turned if you watch The King of Kings, it was actually an interior set, but it had these huge 50-foot walls. And so they realized that by putting a gate on these walls, it could be the outside of a jungle. Apparently, if you opened up the gate and looked through, the jungle set was on the kind of on the far side. So by looking through the opening, it was probably a good inspiration for Kong. Imagine a 50-foot gorilla stomping around in those paper mache trees out there.
Would be
And if you looked really closely, you could see Johnny Weissmuller playing Tarzan, yet another king, the king of the jungle, king of the apes, in a bunch of the Tarzan movies.
Yeah, all the RKO Tarzan movies were shot out there.
I think King Kong would have done a quick job on Tarzan.
I think they would have been friends.
Yeah,
no, I think it would have had a similar resolution to King Kong versus Bambi.
No.
yeah, right.
Probably the most iconic part of that lot, and it's still there because it was in 1990. It was decreed a landmark. Is the old Thomas Ince building, which is right across the street from what used to be Kay and Dave's, which is not a landmark and is now a Shake Shack.
That is kind of a landmark.
Well, which people mistake for being Tara, although the walkway was, but not the main building.
Yeah, it was obviously Gone with the Wind, famously filmed on that lot. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of when Selznick took over that building and filming Gone with the Wind there? What filmed there? And many of those flats could still be found in warehouses and in the art department decades later.
Yeah, you used to be able to walk out to the scene docks, and they had some old sets from Gone with the Wind. They had part of Scarlett's bedroom, and they had the stained glass windows in the church during the siege of Atlanta. You could just walk back there and see them. And somebody put yellow tape around them and said, "Do not rent," because they knew that these were valuable items. And there was a son of one of the owners of the studio. This was during the late 90s, who was hanging around the studio, and he saw the "do not rent" tape, and he thought that meant that he could destroy them. So he got on a forklift and smashed everything to pieces. The only thing that survived is a couple panes of glass. Apparently, they still exist somewhere.
Wow.
And when was he put to death?
It was a very sad story. The administration building actually was seen in Gone with the Wind as well. The driveway and the walkway going up to the house was the big house that Rhett Butler built for Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. Right. So the house was covered with a matte painting, but the driveway, you can see it. It looked exactly the same.
You have a great...
the day they started filming, Selznick raising a Confederate flag on the flagpole in front of that building. And there's an interesting kind of divot on the top of the flagpole. And if you go out there to this day, you can still see it. That's where probably the last Confederate flag that flew in California was at. Wow. So, the ghosts are there. You just have to find them. I know when Amazon bought the place, and they didn't actually buy it, they're leasing it. But when they took over the property, they went inside the administration building, which is very elaborate. It looks wonderful from the street. Mm-hmm. But it's almost like a set. It's only about 15 feet deep. If you walk into it, you can walk right through it. I mean, it's got real offices in it, and there's a staircase going up to the administration offices. But it was built to look better on the outside, driving by on the street, than it was to look from the inside.
It's basically one long hall of offices.
Yeah, it's basically a hall of offices, really, and that's it.
Yeah.
So there's not. But apparently, Amazon got in, and they said the place smelled like old lady.
Well, it's funny you say that. Because we had a good friend of ours who's an executive at Sony. Ashley, you must remember this from one of the showrunner dinners. But he swore that it was haunted. Yeah. They had all these stories, and I don't believe in that stuff. But it was pretty. They were pretty scared, and nobody wanted to work there at night. And had amazing stories about things that had transpired there that I was absolutely fascinated by.
Yeah, every studio worth its salt has to have its ghost stories associated with it. I've heard that Thomas Ince is walking the hallways. He's the independent producer that built the place. Yeah, in 1918, I think it was. Who
was murdered on the yacht with Chaplin.
He died under mysterious circumstances. Let's put it that way. So it was his widow that sold the property to Cecil B. DeMille, and eventually RKO acquired the property.
Right.
And they're the ones that leased it out to Selznick. Selznick never actually owned the studio, even though he used the administration building as his logo for decades.
Yeah.
Right.
Continued to maintain offices there for the rest of his life, but RKO was the landlord. And
one of my favorite stories that you have in the book, it's not really a story, but fun fact is that Tara, which was, dilapidated, falling apart for many years after production, was finally raised to make way for the prisoner of war camp in Hogan's Heroes.
Yes, if you look at Stylog 13, the funny Nazis are mincing around in the exact same spot where Scarlett O'Hara sat on the porch at Tara.
And so apparently they knew nothing.
That's
yeah, they definitely knew nothing.
I worked on that lot for at least 3 or 4 movies, and always loved it. And only after about the 3rd movie did I realize what history it had there as I walked around the lot. Of course, the farthest back soundstage was the home of the Batcave for Batman. And there were, there was a marker on the wall that said all the various things that were shot there. But it was also the very first studio that I visited and worked at. I was a set dresser for a still photograph session for Life magazine with Frank Zappa and his family. And we were on one of the sound stages making a little set for him. So I have, very close ties to that, to the Culver lot, as it was later called. But
and it's important, I guess, to distinguish the fact that what is the Culver lot now
is not the 40-acre. They were adjacent.
right.
Yeah, it was literally in back of the main property.
Yeah.
You could that's not where the term backlot originated, but in this case, it was literally
the back.
back.
And when people talk about how Century City used to be the old Fox lot until they had their financial problems in the late 60s and turned into condos, I mean, Culver City was pretty much MGM and 40 acres. And, now it's obviously not.
Yeah, those would have been the days. I had a strange, I guess I still have a strange fixation. I've always thought that in the case of a movie studio, the factory is even more interesting than the product is. And, I'm a big movie and television buff, but I find myself wishing these annoying actors would get out of the way so I could see what set they're standing in front of, because I think that's fascinating. Remember, I used to watch these movies where Jerry Lewis or Pee Wee Herman or somebody would come to Hollywood and they'd climb over the fence in a movie studio and they'd have these wonderful adventures wandering around. And I remember thinking that would be fun. That would be something that would be better than a day at Disneyland, climbing over the fence in these studios and wandering around.
Well, I want to ask you, because obviously so many great movies, like Citizen Kane shot a lot of the movie there. They shot some stuff on the Chaplin stages on La Brea also, but there was a bunch of classic movies. You mentioned King Kong, Gone with the Wind, that shot there. Obviously, when Desilu took over, a ton of television, like The Untouchables and Star Trek. But if you were driving a tour, like a Universal tour bus around 40 acres, what would you tell us about? Give us a little tour. What would we be seeing as we drove around in that fantasy tour bus looking at 40 acres?
I think what makes something like that, like a movie studio backlot, fun is that you can have a jungle next to downtown New York, next to a Western town, next to the terrain for another planet. And the fact that you can walk around the corner, you see something entirely different, is what makes it interesting. Anybody can go to New York and get interesting pictures of New York City, but making New York on a backlot, I think, is much more interesting and much more creative. And you can make the New York that that the screenwriter planned when he wrote the story. So wandering around a movie studio like Culver, like the backlot would, it's fascinating because it's almost an improvement on reality. Their New York is going to be more New York than the real thing is, because they've studied the real thing. But,
certainly more New York than Toronto.
Yeah, certainly more New York than Toronto is. So I think that's what would make that tour a lot of fun. I actually sat down and I wondered, like, if I was going to go there and I was going to take that mythical tour, when would I want to do it?
Right.
And it's usually better to do these things later rather than sooner, when everything's there, but before everything starts getting torn down. Terra, for example, was there until 1959, and then they crated it up and shipped it to Atlanta, and it stayed in the warehouse and back in the barn and back of a plantation there up until recently when they auctioned it off. It'd be fun, it'd be fun that it was on the top of a little hill with artificial trees made of telephone poles on either side of it. You could walk down that, and just to the left of that for a long time was Manderley from Hitchcock's Rebecca. And it was never a full-size set. It was just a very large miniature. So you'd find that. And if you took this tour in the late 50s, there'd also be a Western town that Desi Arnaz had built. There was a big glut for Westerns in the late 50s, and that was one thing that 40 Acres never had. So that was the only thing that he actually added to the place to improve it, was he built a Western town there.
And Bonanza filmed there, right?
Excuse me?
Bonanza filmed.
Bonanza didn't film there all the time, but they were there intermittently on and off. There's several. You can see it pretty well in several episodes. But other than Bonanza, it's hard to think of a quality Western that actually spent very much time there. But on the other side of the Western Street, there was something they called the Arab Village. Although I went through the production records, it was sometimes called BINGEN Street, and sometimes it was called the Moroccan Village, and sometimes it was called the Spanish Village. So it's ethnicity dependent on how you dress the set. But you can see it in a couple Trek episodes. You can see it had like a raised platform and a bunch of like kind of Moorish architecture.
Yeah, it was in the pilot. It was in the cage. They used it.
Yeah, you can see it
in
the cage. We're talking about Gone with the Wind. Some of the I think it's interesting that the cage shot in the same stage where Rhett Butler said, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn" to Scarlett O'Hara. So you've got 1 degree of separation between William Shatner and Clark Gable.
Well, and also Ernie Haller.
It's romantic and wonderful.
Ernie Haller, who shot that as the DP, was involved with the second Star Trek pilot, Where No Man Has Gone Before. So I want to ask you, since you bring up Star Trek, because the other time they used the Arab town was for Errand of Mercy, where for Organia, which is so interesting. So Desilu buys the lot. Obviously, Desi Arnaz is doing a lot to keep the lights on, because they have I Love Lucy, but they don't really put a ton of money into it. They're renting it and they're using it for their own productions. So they ask a young producer, Gene Roddenberry, who just finished doing The Lieutenant for NBC, to film his pilot 65, The Cage, on those stages. But that was not a good experience for anybody, for a multitude of reasons, including that great quote from Robert Butler when they told him, "Oh, they shot Tara here, and this is where Tara burned." And he said, "Yeah, they should have burned these stages." Tell us why they were so unhappy with these stages that they were shooting.
Well, it's like 4 stages in a row, and DeMille had built it, and you could remove the walls to make it one long shooting space if you needed to, but that made the soundproofing bad on it. And there was an unexplained trench running through the floor on one side of it that was about 6 feet deep, so you could fall and break your neck if you happened to not be paying any attention to what you were doing. And there was pigeons that were they complained were up in the roof, and they were interfering with the sound recording. And they were, everybody's a critic. They were apparently crapping on the sets as well. So I think that's why, for their soundstage work after that, Trek ended up going to the Desilu lot over next to Paramount, and that's where they shot most of the interiors after that, just because it was not a good experience for anybody, apparently.
Because I love also the stories that the bathrooms were built, because these were all silent stages, so nobody cared about sound, that the bathrooms were built adjacent to the sound stage. So every time somebody flushed the toilet, it would interrupt the take. So they had to post a PA on the bathrooms to make sure nobody used them when they were filming, which is just crazy.
The job that a PA has to do.
And then, but they went back for Where No Man Has Gone Before. They shot those, the second pilot there as well.
Yeah, they weren't, like I said, after that, it's, I actually tracked on my Paramount book. I tracked a bunch of the stages where they shot their interiors, and it's funny, they had a Western Street on at Paramount,
Right.
and for some reason though, when Trek did their gunfight at the OK Corral episode,
Spectre of the Gun, yeah.
Spectre of the Gun, they use that kind of surrealist tactic of having
shot it inside on a stage.
Yeah, of having kind of cardboard sets, literally like they weren't finished. Which, in a way, it's kind of interesting because it was almost like, when you think about what a Western town looks like, your imagination fills in a lot of the details. So that, when Desi built his Western Street at 40 acres, people said it wasn't as complete as some of the other Western streets that were elsewhere in town. But it didn't need to be. I remember people said, well, they were being cheap when they shot that episode of Star Trek because they didn't even finish the sets. But they weren't being cheap. I think it was an artistic decision.
It looks great.
Outside the stage and shot it on an actual Western Street, if that's what they wanted. But they wanted that artifice.
I think that Bonanza actually was using the Western set on Paramount at the time.
They might have been, but I'm sure Trek could have slipped in for an afternoon if they needed to.
Not against one of the highest rated shows on TV.
Yeah, could have been. Maybe it was an economic decision.
But even though Star Trek ended up moving over to Melrose, they on the RKO lot there, or the Desilu, what had become the Desilu half before they married with Paramount, Star Trek went back to 40 acres many times to avail themselves of a lot of the sets, most famously for City on the Edge of Forever, where they shot on the old Andy Griffith street.
Yeah, that was their so-called New York Street. It was very urban on one side, and it kind of terminated at the railroad depot from Gone with the Wind. But that side of it was originally called Chicago Street. It was built for a movie called Roxy Hart, which was the origin of the play Chicago. So that part was very urban, but then it got more and more rural as it moved across the lot.
Right.
So for an episode for like City on the Edge of Forever, they used the very urban side. But if you look on the internet, everyone likes to print the shot of William Shatner and Joan Collins walking by Floyd's barbershop,
right.
And they didn't even change the name. It said Floyd's barbershop, just because once again it was all artifice, and they figured if you're not looking at the actors, then it probably doesn't matter. And though the Andy Griffith people used to complain that Desi would never fix anything, if there was a hole in a wall,
right.
Production would have to fix it.
Right.
So that way Desi got the crew that was paying him to use that lot to do
fix
repairs
everything
on the set. So they probably didn't have a clean pane of glass that fit that window. So they probably had to leave Floyd's barbershop sign intact.
I love that crossover idea. I think that's amazing. I mean, you could have Don Knotts. He's just got like one bullet for his phaser. I mean,
I think it's a great. I think it's a great idea. I don't know. It does make you think about the fact that these two shows were working more at the same time using the same sets. Did they hang out with each other between takes? Did they?
You get like Andy Griffith and Shatner together. I mean, come on, the captain of the Salvage One and the captain of the Enterprise.
Well, they never salvaged one.
Yes, you were one of a dwindling group of people that remember Salvage One. An ever dwindling group. Of course, they also used the main the town square in Return of the Archons and Miri as well, which and look, I don't think there's a better of all the Star Trek episodes where you really see the lot as well as in Miri, which is gorgeously shot. I don't love the episode, but I love it as a snapshot of 40 acres.
Yeah, there seems to be more wide shots where they put the camera on a crane, or they put it up higher, they put it farther back, so you could accomplish my dream of being able to see the set without the actor standing in front of them.
Right.
That it's shot very well, and you can see the Mayberry police station off on one side. So it's another interesting. It's a really good episode for looking at 40 acres as kind of a snapshot of what that set looked like at that time.
Yeah, and so we talked about the New York Street, or the Arabian Square, Main Street. Did Star Trek use any other locations there that you're aware of?
Like I said, they used the Arab village a couple times. I can't think of anything beyond that, where they needed to. Usually, when they went on location, but wasn't 40 acres, it was like Lake Sherwood, I think, or something like that. So, but
yeah, they never made it to the Gomer Pyle Quonset hut.
That would have been an interesting crossover episode too.
Yeah, I mean, by the third season, the budget had been cut so much they only went on location once, which out to what was it, the reservoir where they shot Paradise Syndrome, right, Aaron? Darren?
Yes.
Yeah. And then but those couple, and then Bronson Caves was another staple of Star Trek locations at the time, which was also a Batman location.
They used that in one of the movies too, didn't they?
Wasn't
did. That the
It's in 6 for the prison planet.
I've always been a big believer in. You probably figured this out, in places having their own identity and their own personality almost as much as the actors and actresses do. I remember reading ages ago Gene Roddenberry saying that for him, the Enterprise was as much a character as any of the people, because he fought in World War II, and their ship was like one of the gang. That was something that they treasured.
Yeah,
and it was a part of the team. And that's what I've always thought about the Enterprise. When they destroyed the Enterprise so cavalierly, in one of the movies, I that bothered me more than when they killed off Spock. Then they did the same thing in one of the Next Generation movies as well. I was like, you can't destroy the Enterprise. Building another one doesn't mean it's going to be the same thing.
And that's something on the new shows. We talked about that. This is an anal thing, but it was kind of like they call it Enterprise instead of the Enterprise.
Yeah.
And that reflects the fact that there isn't this sense of the ship being unique. And, by calling it the Enterprise, it's kind of like,
there's only one.
There's only one. This is something special. This is a character in our show, as opposed to, oh, there's Reliant, there's Enterprise, there's Constellation. It's just not the same. But, we talked about Batman shot there, and the famous Batcave was built on those stages. And
they also had an exterior shot of them driving the Batmobile across the 40 acres. I think it was one of the episodes with Shame.
The Western town.
And when Shame, I think, shoots the Batmobile and it becomes a wireframe Batmobile, that's right there in the middle of the Western town.
Yeah, see, there's all these little secret appearances that you can find. I think there was a Beverly Hillbillies episode where they ended up back there too, where they end up where a movie studio ends up playing itself. Those are always interesting because you get to see views of the sets that you don't usually get. So those are episodes like that are really to be cherished.
Well, there's that great in Batman third season. There's a scene where Batman and Batgirl are captured right in front of the INS building, the administration building,
right.
And it all is shot like right there in front of, and it's like right on the lawn. It's wild to watch that for anybody who kind of knows the history. And then Mission Impossible, another Desilu show, shot a bunch of stuff on the lot as well, didn't they?
Yeah, they were there on and off. Whenever they could find a set that they could use. They used the Hogan's Heroes POW camp in one episode where it was supposed to be like a prisoner of war camp down in some little banana republic.
Right.
So once again, they could put the cameras farther back than they did when they were shooting Hogan's Heroes, because it didn't matter if you saw the palm trees in the background.
Right.
And Hogan's Heroes, they always had to put the camera up close, because if you got too far back, you'd catch a palm tree in Germany.
Take that, Tom Cruise.
But the palm tree was captured behind the lines.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a shame that Mission Impossible, the movies, haven't gotten over there as well. I always feel like that's a I always think that's a nice one. A remake shoots in the same stages or the same place that the original shot. I always feel like it's some sort of an homage, even though it never is. It's just they're booking a soundstage, and that was the cheapest one that was available at the moment. But I've always felt that was I've always thought that was interesting. Like I remember in Get Shorty, which was produced by MGM. They, at the end of the movie, there's an aerial shot where John Travolta comes out of a soundstage in Hollywood, and the camera pulls back, and it's a Sony lot, which was the old MGM studios. So MGM had to go back and rent their own facility, their former facility. And I always wondered if that was intentional, if that was some sort of an homage to their past. It probably wasn't. It was probably Sony was probably just the cheapest one that was available at the time. But it warmed my heart that there was an MGM movie shooting on the old MGM lot, even if it was inadvertent.
Yeah. And that was a remarkable lot. I mean, people who go to Sony, they don't realize, again, they're seeing the shell of you know, and obviously it was falling apart too. And then when Goober and Peters took over, they spent a lot of money, but it's, I mean, you see glimmers of the past, but it's mostly new sound stages, new buildings, new administration. There's a great featurette on, I think it was The Big Parade, where it's kind of a history of the MGM lot that has all this great archival footage of MGM. So what were, obviously back in the day, makeup, hair and makeup, costume, they would have these giant buildings, and a lot of they didn't have honey wagons or anything like that, or star wagons. People would have a space on the lot in a building, which would be their changing room. What were the below the lines facilities like at 40 acres? Like, what were the other structures, the support buildings and things on that lot like?
Not very good. I think everybody usually complained about it, just because, once again, none of the landlords were interested in building up the infrastructure, so it really didn't exist. There was just a couple restrooms on the entire 40 acres property.
Yeah.
And there was
there was Bologna Creek.
Yeah, there was always Bologna Creek. I remember I was on the set for one of the Walton's reunion movies once, and they were filming, the entire cast was there filming in the original Walton's house over at Warner Brothers. And one of the actors walked up to the other. They'd been kids in the show, but they were adults. And one of them said, "Where's the bathroom at?" And the other one said, "Just go around and you go behind the house. That's what we used to do."
Oh my God.
Oh dear.
So yeah, the infrastructure there was never very good. Everyone complained about the commissary, and everybody complained about the food. They usually, when they were shooting at 40 acres, they had a shed that they would use as a temporary commissary. So they'd give people their shit on a shingle. They'd drop it on their plate and give it to them. And so the extras would go and sit at in this Arab village. And every time I've seen a picture of food being served at 40 acres, they're always sitting at the Arab village, because their so-called commissary, which was basically just a shed with a hot plate in it, was over there. So it's you know, it was bad during the golden Hollywood era, and I think that just got worse and worse when Desi Arnaz started running the place, because he didn't want to put any money into it.
What year was the 40 acre backlot closed down?
It would have been, the last productions that shot there would have been the late 1970s.
Right.
And
because I just want to back up for a second. Steve Desilu had sold it when they merged with Paramount to who? And then take us through those years leading to its being.
Well, after Desilu, let's see. There was a company with the most inspiring name I've ever heard. You're all going to want to name a company this when I tell you what it is. There was a company that bought it called Perfect Film and Chemicals.
Yeah.
Yeah,
they bought it from Paramount. They bought it from Paramount after Paramount bought Desilu.
Yeah. Well, what happened is Paramount bought the physical. They bought Desilu, and they ended up buying the Desilu Nerve Center, which was next door to Paramount anyway. So it was just a matter of taking a fence down, and they expanded their studio.
Right.
And that's how Star Trek, of all things, fell into their lap. You know, they Paramount, it's kind of one of the crown jewels in their hat these days. But
and Mission Impossible. That was a pretty good deal, huh?
Yeah.
Star Trek and Mission Impossible, not bad.
Yeah, Lucy knew what she was doing.
Yeah, I think she was the only one that would give Star Trek a spin at the wheel, because it was obviously very expensive. So she was one smart bookie. And
well, they do say print the legend, don't they, Steve? So it's hard to parse what was true about Lucy believing in Star Trek with the legend. clearly she believed in going ahead with the show because it was a very expensive show. But it's kind of like to print the legend now, where it's like Star Trek wouldn't have happened without Lucy, and that she insisted they make the pilot regardless, and and then when they offered the second pilot, so we just don't know, do we?
Yeah, let's agree to print the legend in this case. Lucy the benefit of the doubt and say that she was some sage seer who could see into the future and realize at some point. One would like to
That's
think.
nice to believe.
How did they separate the responsibilities, Lucy and Desi? I mean, especially once the divorce happened.
They apparently remained fairly amiable for the rest of their lives. Lucy was never particularly interested in the business sense, and Desi actually turned out to be really good at that sort of thing. I don't think anybody expected that this comic Cuban band leader could be good at business, but he turned Desilu into one of the largest producers of television in the world. Yeah. And one time they operated 3 separate studios in Hollywood and Culver City.
Isn't the famous story?
That was mostly him because she was busy. She was busy working.
Yeah. Isn't the famous story that he was the one who insisted on filming Lucy on film, and that led to the syndication business because they were able to show them it wasn't kinescopes anymore. They actually were able to repeat the episodes because they weren't filming them on live or on tape.
Yeah, well, at the time, most television came out of New York, so the only way you could see it on the West Coast was through a kinescope or some sort of a cross-country hookup or something like that. And yeah, of course, he gets once again, let's print the legend, but he gets the credit for basically inventing the format that sitcoms still follow today. Where they shoot on
three camera setup is credited to him. Yeah.
And that's we all have Desi to thank for that crazy Cuban.
I want to circle back to what Darren asked, which is it's kind of like the end of Bunker Hill, which was this amazing part of Los Angeles with these incredible buildings and this bustling metropolis, and then slowly it died to death of 1,000 cuts until it was no more and replaced by office buildings. And even the hill on which Bunker Hill was on was destroyed. So I wonder if you could take us through those last few sad years of 40 Acres. As it's falling apart. I know they always had a vermin problem, so I can't imagine that got any better. I mean, that was another thing Roddenberry used to complain about, were the vermin on the sets.
And he wasn't talking about the actors.
Well, he may have been, but
we're the writers.
Yeah, I think when there was a lot of production going on, they could always palm the repairs off on the on whoever was using the sets. But like with Desi, when Desi left, a bunch of Perfect Film and Chemical came in, and they didn't have the contacts, and they didn't have they weren't as business savvy about how the entertainment industry works. So they ended up selling the company. The only interesting person that came in the last couple decades of 40 Acres was Grant Tinker, who was Mary Tyler Moore's husband. He was like the only creative executive. And I think at the time, people thought he'd be like another David Selznick or another Desi Arnaz, if you want to go there. But the silver, everything he touched turned to gold until he bought Culver Studios. And after that, nothing he did went right. The only show he had that was a hit, he hated it personally, but it was a big success, was Baywatch. And that didn't become a success until after he sold it and it went into first run syndication.
So for our audience that doesn't know Grant Tinker, he was part of MTM, which was responsible for such amazing shows as St. Elsewhere, Remington Steele, Hill Street was MTM, wasn't it? No, it wasn't. Hill Street wasn't, but just a succession.
The Mary Tyler Moore show.
Yeah, but it was a succession of incredible, critically acclaimed television series. But so you said that when
he got his own studio, and then it all went to pot.
Right.
God, Baywatch was the antithesis of everything he did.
Yeah, it kind of is, and I don't think he was very happy with it. I think it only ran under his banner for the first season, and they canceled it. And then it went on to become it wouldn't stay
international success.
Did it shoot? I mean, not the beach, but did the standing sets shoot at 40 acres?
You know, I don't know. When I went through the production records, I tried to find out if I'd like to say they did, just because it's it's one more feather in the cap for the place, but I don't think so. So it's hard to say. I mean, I don't know if they let's just leave a question mark hovering over that one. I'm not gonna comment for the record on that. I don't know.
Yeah, sure.
It's funny, in the 80s, the Culver Studios themselves was very popular to Steven Spielberg, because he shot at least 2 movies there. He shot E.T. there.
Shot E.T. there, yeah.
And he shot Hook there. So it's pretty amazing that apparently he wanted to sort of be out of the range of a quote unquote regular studio and keep his production a little more hidden away.
That's always been another asset that Culver Studios and 40 Acres had, is because there wasn't, except when Selznick was there and DeMille was there before that, the big bosses weren't there. It was a rental lot.
Yeah.
So you could get away from the bosses. The producer couldn't walk from his office down to the soundstage and annoy everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was a good place to get away. I remember I talked to Ron Howard about 40 Acres, and he said it was wonderful because they'd be in the sound stages for like 3 days a week, and for the last 2 they'd go out to 40 Acres. And he said he'd ride his bicycle around the place, and he said, like, the cast, you could just tell the tension. The cast was less tense whenever they weren't under the nose of the of the executives.
Right.
Because they didn't want to drive from Hollywood to Culver City, especially back
who
then.
would
Grow up. And it was like for a TV show or a movie to be shot, because it was kind of away from the glare of the spotlight.
Right.
No, that's so interesting, and I love what you said in your book about E.T. that they had wanted to shoot in Utah, and then they decided to shoot the home of the family at 40 Acres. So, and then they were able to then go shoot all the wood scenes up north because they had saved some money by shooting the house here.
Yeah, it worked out really well. It's hard, I'm a big advocate for, I think everything should be shot within the 30-mile zone. If I have my way, that's, anytime anything goes anywhere on location, I feel like it's a loss, not just to, not just the local crews, but just to the finished product. I'm a big believer that a movie looks better and sounds better when it comes out of Hollywood.
Well, and better crews.
There used to be,
we got the best crews in the world here, obviously.
That was a while ago when they used to shoot movies here.
But it's interesting because
so
it was so short-sighted to destroy all these, whether it be Fox selling off half their backlot or 40 Acres, because now they can't build new stages fast enough. Santa Clarita is rebuilding a bunch of stuff, and
they're tearing the Warner Brothers Ranch down as we speak, which has had wonderful sets on it since the early 30s.
What's going up there?
Sound stages, wall-to-wall sound stages. And I think that's great, but I think it's a horrible loss to American popular culture that they're tearing down the house, from the house from Bewitched, and the house from I Dream of Jeannie, and the house from
Lethal Weapon,
Partridge Family.
where Mel Gibson fought Gary Busey on the lawn with the sprinkler going.
Plus, it's completely against the entire reason that they set up the movie business here anyway, because of the weather, so that they could shoot outside and also get away from Edison's patents. But that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, it's all like I said, it's the soapbox that I spend way too much time standing and screaming from, because nobody listens to me anyway. So, but I'm I just think that it's, if you saw the movie, the series WandaVision, they shot on that street where all these sitcoms have been shot.
Yeah.
There's a certain resonance and richness to that, because that's where all these classic sitcoms really were shot, was on this street.
Yep.
And they probably Warner Brothers probably made the upkeep on those sets up for an entire year just off that one project, and yet they're still tearing it down
to build more sound stages.
Yeah. It's like the whole myth about clueless, soulless studio executives is really true. Everybody realizes how valuable this sort of thing is, except for the people that can push the button and have it destroyed without even thinking about it.
It's all okay. They saved the Friends fountain.
Yes, the Friends fountain is intact, so the world is a better place for that. So.
Well, most of these studios had these annexes, like Fox had Fox Ranch and Paramount, where they. How many of these still exist? You said Warner Brothers is tearing down, to build sound stages now. Does the Fox where they shot Planet of the Apes, does that still exist?
It's a state park.
Yeah.
In fact, MASH was shooting there still when Fox sold the land to the state.
Right.
And they had to carve out an agreement that MASH could continue to shoot there as long as it was on the air. And, they still occasionally, the state is willing to rent the property out. So occasionally there's still production that goes on up there. But it's, wouldn't it have been fun to walk through the village from Planet of the Apes?
Oh my
when
God.
it was there? I mean,
Imagine
what that would be like.
Yeah.
That'd be like walking. I mean, that'd be like walking onto the set for Star Trek or something for me. That would be amazing.
Oh.
I had a really good friend. I should mention him, Billy Blackburn, who was on all 3 seasons of the original series, and he took Super 8 movies of these things. And I've been talking about how I'm affected by these sets. But in one of his movies, he's standing on stage 31 at Paramount, where they had the bridge for the Enterprise, with his camera, and then he walks around and you can see the flats and the 2x4s holding those walls up. And it's profound and affecting. Like, you look at this and it's fascinating, but you almost want to cry. You almost don't want to see that the bridge of the Enterprise was that insubstantial. So
those films are great they put them on the Blu-rays.
Yeah, Paramount finally gave him a big check. I'm glad they did, because but I used to go over to his house and he'd have junk from Star Trek sitting around in the living room. I'd love to know what happened to it.
Probably still at a convention. But it's I mean, that is such a great snapshot of history too, those films, of specifically of Star Trek. I mean, I feel like and it's been a long time since I watched them. I feel like there might have been him shooting some stuff at Vasquez Rocks up in
one of their location trips. I don't know if it was Vasquez. It was like it was a lake somewhere. I remember he shot. Was it the episode where it was the Native American type aliens?
Yeah, Paradise Syndrome.
Yeah. I don't know if all of that showed up on. Like, I used to go over to his house and he'd he literally set up the projector and I'd watch these things with him. Wow. It was so nice when Paramount let him do an audio commentary for these movies. It kind of brings Billy back. I'm so happy that they finally came to terms on that.
No, that was great. There was, all this Star Trek footage for a long time that was floating around that finally started to show up, because it was the same thing with all Gene Roddenberry's outtakes that had only been rumored to exist for a long time. And then, Paramount finally put up the money so that they could release the Roddenberry Vault, which is also a wonderful artifact of that time. But that was mostly outtakes and extended scenes and deleted scenes, as opposed to sort of behind the scenes. But that's a really wonderful set as well.
But remembering stuff like this and locations and sets that are long gone now is very bittersweet, because all of those memories are in the shows that we loved and in the movies that we've watched, but they are all phantoms now, and they don't exist. And it's kind of neat to sort of remember and look at photos and read memories of these things, because it is a part of at least Hollywood history. And it's something that I've always been interested in when I first moved here in '85. And everything was almost all gone by the time I got here. Yeah,
it's the coin a phrase. It's most of it is gone with the wind now, and it is sad. I remember when I got my first book published. It was my about the MGM backlot. It took myself, and I had a couple collaborators. It took us almost a decade to find a publisher that would publish this, because they kept saying, "So you want to write this book kind of like a guidebook?" And I'm like, yeah, that's it exactly. It's like a guidebook of what it would be like to wander around in MGM, just like I fantasized about when I was 9 years old.
Yeah.
And they were like, so wait a minute, hold on. you want to write a guidebook about a place that people can't go to that doesn't exist anymore. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. I'd be thrown out in the hallway, and the door would be slammed so fast. So it took years to find a publisher that would agree to let me do something like this. I wanted to show maps. I've kind of I have a big fat 3-ring binder of like maps of all the Hollywood studios.
Right.
And I wanted to publish these maps and put little numbers on them saying, if you walk left to number 9, you'd see this. And if you turn right, you go past the prop department and you find yourself on Brooklyn Street or something like that. And I found I thought that was so fascinating. I'm glad the book is a success because it's allowed me to write other books about other studios.
And it's a great book, by the way. I love MGM, Hollywood's Greatest Backlot. That's a terrific book.
Well, give it a year when you got Vision Pro out and you do an entire like augmented reality program where you can walk onto the lots and do a tour of versions of those lots that only exist like in your mind but used to exist. Like you literally could look over at number 9 and kind of see what was there.
But it won't have the pigeons.
You won't have the pigeons. Although, you know what? If like they managed to do it in 4D, you actually like get that virtual pigeon shit on you. I think that would be fantastic. And the rats.
But see, to take your concept a step farther, that's how they're really going to be making movies. They won't have to build any of these sets. They can, it can all be created inside a huge hard drive somewhere.
I think they're hoping that.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what they wanted to.
I got to ask you, Steve, to kind of wrap up, but we've had this conversation before. What is the most magical lot that still exists? And I think we came to the decision it's Paramount. Do you have because you can still feel like it's Sunset Boulevard. There's so much, partially because they were cheap, so much of the old stuff is still there, as opposed to a lot like MGM where most of it has been changed so dramatically, even though you can find little bits and nooks and crannies of the old days. What for you is and I can't give it to Fox as much as I love the Fox lot just because so much of it is gone, but what to you is the greatest remaining lot that is like that magical lot?
Well, Paramount is up there. If I had to choose one, I'd probably have to say Warner Brothers because all the cliches come true there.
Right.
It feels exactly like it should feel like when you're walking around the movie studio, and they've still got a huge property department with row upon rows of bric-a-brac that you've seen in 1,000 movies. And you can go to the commissary and you can literally see a guy dressed like a cowboy eating lunch with a guy dressed like an Indian. And it's still got a huge back lot with the acres of sets standing on it. So it kind of feels like how you would imagine a movie studio would have felt like if you'd walked through those gates, when Humphrey Bogart was making movies there with Lauren Bacall or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, so much of the old Gangster Street is still exactly the same. You can watch Public Enemy or Little Caesar, Public Enemy, or like Roaring Twenties, and see exactly the same buildings.
Yeah, exactly. I used to have fights. I used to be an archivist there, and I'd have fights with soulless studio executives. Right? They'd be like, "Well, we need to knock this wall down." I'm like, "I can't, Jim. You can't knock this wall down." Jimmy Cagney was machine gunned on that wall, in front of that wall 3 times or something like that, and they just didn't get it. It's in some ways it's not fair asking a movie studio executive to understand this sort of thing, because these are movies that, for most of them, a lot of people that are working in the entertainment industry aren't really interested in it. They want to, they're interested in dating actresses, and they're interested in making a lot of money and having a big house with a big swimming pool in Beverly Hills, but the product themselves is completely beyond them. So, it's hard to ask. It's hard to ask a donkey to behave like a racehorse, because at the end of the day, it's still a donkey. And a lot of the studio executives they just don't understand. And no matter how I argue with them till they were blue in the face, and they still didn't understand. They were like, "Well, this Jimmy Cagney person isn't making a movie there now, right? So why do we need to save the wall that he was machine gunned in front of?" And you realize they had no idea who Jimmy Cagney even was.
Yeah.
And these are the people that are deciding what the world gets to watch. People talk about how bad our movies are. I'd say they're awfully good, considering the people that have the power to greenlight them in many cases.
Ashley, you wanted to?
I'm just going to say, I mean, I mean, I guess other than the taco thing, like I agree with you about Warner Brothers. I've always like that place has a very special place in my heart, and because of shooting there on one of the great experiences of my life on Terminator. But my very first experience truly being on a lot and truly being taken through a lot, like I'd been on the Paramount lot for various reasons and been to the various lots for meetings, but I will never forget circa 2003, John Schneider, Bo Duke himself, also Pa Kent, taking me around and showing me Hazard County and saying, here's a gazebo, like where we got married, and that, like the General Lee used to come around that corner, and that's where the garage was, and that's where Boss Hogg was. And I was thinking, but that's also the stairs that Batman used to run up. And just, getting that sense of history and being able to picture all of those things he was talking about being presented by the man himself. It was all very like, the cognitive dissonance was real. But at the same time, it was also magical. We're realizing when you're shooting there that like, oh yeah, it's like, I know what that building is, and I've seen it a million times. And now it's a gun shop and the Terminator is going inside. You know what I'm saying? It just, it messes with your head, like as a creative professional. But the thing that really jumps out at me, as you're talking, is it's such a weird business that we're in. It's such a weird art that we do, because when we build these sets, when we create these props, we're not really, as much as we want to turn them into monuments, they're ephemera, right? It's like they are ultimately a piece of art. They contribute to an illusion that generates something that's like art. They're like, the dots in a painting, like in an impressionist painting, that add up to something else. And, what I try to get my head around is like, because I had this very visceral reaction to the story of, all of those pieces from the Gone with the Wind sets being destroyed, and like a part of me just like that. But then I think, where does it all go? And, if we tried to preserve it all, like what would be left? If the bridge of the original Enterprise still stood, and God, I wish it did, let me just tell you, it's what happens next? Where does it all go? So it's such an interesting problem to have. I think, especially is why it's very fascinating for me to listen to you, because, you are a historian and an archaeologist who is preserving in your own way a thing that is not designed to be preserved other than how it is presented on film. That's fascinating to me.
Yeah, it is ephemera, and it isn't designed to last. Warner Brothers, they saved like bat suits going back to Michael Keaton, but they're made of like foam latex and like soft rubber. So after a few years, air gets to these things and they just start to crumble. Yeah. And we put them in display cases, and there'd be after a while there'd be a little pile of black residue, standing next to his boots, of pieces falling off these costumes, because they weren't intended to last for 50 years. They were intended to last for a few minutes, for one take, and then be stripped off and replaced by a new piece.
Right.
And the sets are the same way, and they're designed they weren't designed to last as long as the pyramids, even if the set that they were building was a pyramid.
Right.
And Michael Keaton ain't doing too good either. So it's I don't know. He's okay.
You are asking more of them than they were intended to do.
Yeah. And by the way, I think we'd be remiss, even though it's been turned into a theme park for all intents and purposes. Universal is still a pretty amazing lot too.
Yeah, Universal.
Yeah. It's wonderful that they've they found a way to monetize their acres and acres and acres of backlot sets by driving tour trams through them. So God bless them.
Yeah,
I think that's great, and it's that's another one of these places where you can if you get to walk around there, especially if there's not a tour bus going by, it's you can hear the rustlings of the ghosts once again. It's there's a lot of history and a lot of lore
And I loved it
off those walls there
in the 80s when it was still like it was less about the the entertainment of the theme park. It was less Disney, and it was more like you would see the discarded relics of different, like you could still see the Buck Rogers Starfighter just sitting rusting in the rain outside, and they would all that you see. It was everything wasn't there for the presentation. A lot of it was really authentic. Over time it's become less and less authentic because it's all about selling the theme park attraction, but it's still pretty much you really get. It's not like Disney in Florida where it's like you really get to see a studio in action, and obviously it's a pretty remarkable studio.
As soon as
never
they
understood. I was going to say I've never understood people who would like say, "Oh, I don't need to go to Universal Studios here because I saw the one in Florida." I'm like, it's not the same. When they first opened that park, they built a replica of the Psycho House.
Yeah.
That people would take pictures of. So they were taking pictures of a replica of a house that's in California that isn't real to begin with.
Yeah.
So it's a copy, like a third generation Xerox.
And thank God for the theme park, right? Because the Bates Motel and the house would have been raised long ago if it wasn't for Universal theme park.
The secret is they were raised, and those are replicas. But that's not.
Oh, is that right? I didn't know that.
It's been moved. I think
the motel
partially...
section. The motel section is a replica.
Yeah, that's definitely a replica.
But as soon as they realized that their parking cost every day made more per year than their movies did, all bets were off. Because it's crazy, and it's all the movies are designed to bring people into the theme park and pay for parking.
Well, if only 40 Acres had thought of that before,
right?
It was torn down.
Yeah, like I said, it's funny. There's an industrial site there and some big warehouses, and occasionally they'll shoot TV series inside these big warehouses,
right?
Where 40 Acres was at, and I'll sometimes wonder if, like, if there's anybody in there that knows that's where that's where Mayberry and Tara used to be. And if
the Hayden track has now, there are a bunch of warehouses where people tend to shoot indies and smaller things, and and even some TV stuff has been shot in the Hayden track in these old warehouses, not so old warehouses down there. But and in Culver Stages, like you said, was a rental facility until Amazon leased all the space. I mean, I think Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. shot there and a bunch of other places.
Sony owned it for a few years, and they basically just, because they had a big studio up the street, they basically just used it as a rental lot. So, it's that identity has kind of followed the property through its entire life. It's always been a haven for misfits and indies and rental films and, kind of slightly shady studio projects that they couldn't afford to shoot in their own lot, so they rent stages or they rent backlot space over there. So it was always a little bit edgy. There's a great story I found in my book about somebody that was a homeless kid that was living in the sets, and he used to apparently the security came by and shot him when they found him there.
Like on
They
film?
took him to the hospital, and they were afraid he was going to die. And he did. I never found out what happened. There was one news article about it. And I could never find the follow up. I did name searches. I thought about checking with local hospitals to find out what happened to this person. But this was someone who was literally living on a backlot.
Wow.
There's a movie called The Phantom of Hollywood about a masked actor that's they're tearing down his backlot, so he starts killing the studio executives. And this guy was kind of like the actual Phantom of Hollywood, because he was like a ghost. He was like a wraith, kind of drifting around in these sets at night.
And that boy's name was Michael Bay.
Well, Paul, this was so terrific. Thank you, Stephen. And we appreciate you sharing all your thoughts about this, and obviously written some great books that hopefully people can seek out for more more information about all these great lots that you've covered. You've really run the gamut on so many of the great Hollywood studios, and you're finishing a new book. Can you talk about that at all?
I just turned in the manuscript for a new book about Bison Archives, which is I've used to get photos from for most of my books. And it's an archive that is utilized by the Hollywood studios themselves.
Right.
The studios don't, even if they own the copyright on a photo, for example, they don't always have a copy of the photo lying around.
Yeah.
So when I was working at Warner Brothers, I needed a photo. There was a labor, there was a strike that went on there where the protesters turned over a car in the 1940s, and somebody wanted it for some reason, and the studio didn't have a copy of it. And they said, well, call Bison Archives. They're going to have a copy of it. So it was kind of strange being Warner Brothers and having the corporate might of Warner Brothers and having to call an outside vendor for our own photo that we own the copyright to get a copy of it. And they've managed to make a successful business saving stuff the studios don't want to save or aren't smart enough to be able to save.
And this wasn't just the Krikorian days of MGM. All the studios were like this, throwing out their stuff or not saving their stuff.
And Bison Archives was there to salvage a lot of it, fortunately. So I thought, wouldn't it be nice to make a book just about this archive and all these photos that he has that no one else has?
Oh, that's great.
That's what this book's going to be. So
we look forward to reading it. When's it going to be out, Stephen? Do you know? Or
I don't have a publication date. I just turned in the manuscript, so it'll probably, maybe Christmas time. I suspect that might be a fair. Cool. I think it's going to be called Treasures from the Bison Archive or something like that. So look for it.
Well, look, thank you for this walk down memory lane. It's so great. It's such a interesting and obscure piece of Hollywood history that a lot of people don't know.
It's interesting and obscure. Then it's probably something I'm going to be interested in. Your viewers would probably particularly appreciate my Paramount book. I've got a lot of great stories about the. I've got most of the stages that all the different iterations of Trek shot in listed. If you ever wanted to know what stage the different sets for different series were at, most of that's in there. And I marked times where they utilized the back lot and the big B tank with the painted backdrop of the sky on it. Trek used that several times, and stories about the fire that burned down part of their back lot where the Star Trek cast came out of their stage. And
that was another print of legend, wasn't it, Stephen? About Shatner saving the stages single-handedly. It was staged for Entertainment Tonight with the fire hose after the fire had already been put out.
It's funny, in his book, he mentions that the big B sky, nobody knew it was there. They'd forgotten that it was there and no one had used it in decades. And which is ridiculous since he'd used it in Trek a couple times before that. And he also shot a TV series called Barbary Coast where they used it as well. So he would have been very aware of that set being out there. And yet in his book, he goes on and on about how they rediscovered at the studio and forgotten they had this set rusting away in the back lot.
Wow.
My favorite story is actually about the tank, which is used as a parking lot at Paramount for so many years, which they used in Star Trek IV as where the ship crash lands with the whales, and that they couldn't figure out how to flood it because the guy who was responsible for the pipes had retired, and they had to bring him out of retirement in order to figure out actually how to activate the pipes to flood the tank again.
Yeah, that's where the mill part of the Red Sea for the Ten Commandments. It's also
I thought it was God.
But it's funny, the mill made that movie twice, so God only did it once. The mill part of the Red Sea twice. He's got that's also where the Gilligan's Island cast was rescued in a reunion movie, was in that tank. So you've got the Red Sea and and Gilligan's Island and literally in the same place. And Star Trek and a bunch of whales. So
and then later they used it for Clear and Present Danger, Tom Clancy movie, I believe, or Patriot Games. I think it was Clear and Present Danger.
There was one of them that.
Yeah.
I'm really thankful that it's still out there. I'm sure some executive has thought that could be a terrific private parking lot just for his car, but it's it's still there. Knock wood.
That's another sad tradition that's gone by the wayside. Star Trek for so many years shot on the same sets. You had the Desilu sets and motion picture, and then Next Generation and Deep Space Nine and Voyager. Those and then with the new shows, they all shoot in Toronto, and Santa Clarita. But the tradition of shooting it on the Paramount lot is gone.
Yeah, that's a pet peeve of mine. I'm kind of upset about that. That they were always done in house, literally in the house. I remember at Siskel and Ebert show once where they were reviewing a Star Trek movie, and they mentioned what it must be like to be Shatner and Nimoy driving through the Paramount gates, 30 years after the first time they played these parts,
Right.
to shoot these movies. And that was literally what happened. Imagine what it must have been like for them to work at the same place. Actors are gypsies, and yet they spent 50 years of their career, driving through those gates
At Paramount.
And like you said, that tradition has more or less been lost now.
And I mean, it was really truly that, past the Zukar building, you had Star Trek Alley. And for a long, long time, you had Next Generation on one side, and then Deep Space Nine, and then Voyager and Deep Space Nine, and then Enterprise. And it was like all these sound stages were Star Trek. And of course,
Yep.
Planet Hell also. And there was something, it felt like that was part of the DNA of Paramount, and that's all gotten lost.
Yeah, they've went where they went where it's cheapest and where the money is, unfortunately. I remember I pitched some ideas to a producer for Deep Space Nine once, and they gave me a Bible, just so you could keep track of who the characters were and everything. That apparently they give to respective writers. And there was a bit in there where they had actually said, Star Trek. Paramount has been the home of Star Trek for 30 years at that point already, and that all these things were developed in-house, and they were all shot on the lot. They were proud of it. They were proud enough of that to put it in the Bible for the show.
Yeah,
and,
that's interesting.
It's
although not quite true in a sense, because it wasn't Paramount, the original Star Trek. It was the RKO side of the of the Berlin Wall that separated Desilu from Paramount. And then eventually, in '68, when Paramount buys Desilu, they tore down that wall, and then it was part of Paramount. But it didn't start that way.
Yeah, it didn't start that well. It was physically the same place, but it was it did have there was a different name on the water tower over there at that point. But
yeah, it's like my pet peeve.
Legend.
When your old former studio Warner Brothers starts talking about their 100th anniversary and shows all these MGM movies.
Yeah, that just drives me to distraction.
Yeah.
And once again, I could just see people there having the conversation, saying, trying to tell the studio executives, you can't use the Wizard of Oz to represent Warner Brothers, and they're like, why not? We own it, and that'd be the only thing they'd see. So,
that great Warner Brothers movie, Gone with the Wind.
Yes, now they
2001.
That means they made it.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But once again, they don't understand. It's like you're trying to ask them to comprehend something that they could care less about.
Yeah. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us today. This was really informative and a lot of fun. And thanks for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been fun talking a little bit of Trek with you guys.
Absolutely.
Thanks
Take
so
care
much.
and good luck with the new book.
Thank you very much.
Hey, well, I'm ready to open the 50-acre back lot. You know why? It'll be
10
even
acres
better
more?
because it's 10 acres more.
Now,
Like this one goes to 50 acres.
Mark,
That's right.
you kept saying that the 40-acre backlot as if it was the studio. It wasn't the studio. It was the backlot. But it's fine, and it's the same thing. But
What are you talking about?
The Culver stages were not part of the 40 acres.
No, I know, but they were adjacent.
They're
They're
adjacent.
40 acre adjacent.
Yeah.
And obviously the
Were they green?
the administration building was part of the 40 acres backlot.
No.
The Selznick building
No. The 40 acres were the separate piece of land
behind it.
behind it. Yeah.
But you had the building fronting on Culver Boulevard.
Fronting the studio.
The same street that MGM was on. Now Sony.
Well, that's right. Washington and Ince.
I know this, we didn't talk about this. This stretched all the way to the Bologna Creek and Hagera Street.
Yeah.
I mean, this was enormous. I mean, maybe on social, we could show you on a map, what it was like then versus now,
Yeah,
just
now
how
it's
massive this was. It was pretty,
40 acres.
it was 40 acres.
40
Yeah.
acres is a lot.
40 acres, no mules, but 40 acres. And really some great stories from Steve, I have to
It's
say.
great. It's great. And I've always been fascinated with this, and have looked at a ton of the pictures taken during the day, and it was so sad that I couldn't see it.
Me too. I wish I could have been there.
Yeah.
And I'm like I said, recently been picketing at Amazon and being I eat in Culver City. I just went to see Mission Impossible in Culver City at the Culver theaters. I mean, I cannot walk by shop at Trader Joe's. I cannot every time I walk by there, I think about it's sort of that Sarah Peden, All Our Yesterdays, if only.
Sarah Peden? You mean
Sarah Peden?
Sarah Peden. I think I dated her in college.
Sarah Peden. It's in Raleigh.
It's in Raleigh. Not even one time you say it right, you screw up the joke.
With Pete Potwhistle.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. With Pete Potwhistle.
Starring Pete Potwhistle, Sarah Peden, and Jessica von Puttermaker. I
got to say, this is only a taste of the kind of stuff we're going to explore in our film about the locations of Hollywood and of Star Trek, and I'm so excited, to visit things like Vasquez Rocks and Bronson Canyon and Golden Gate Park.
Places you've never heard of.
Yeah, there's a bunch of places you never heard of that Star Trek filmed.
And hopefully it won't turn into a found footage horror film somewhere down the road.
That could happen, because if we have to hike to some of these locations, you could very well see me tumble down the tumbleweeds. I'm not very good on those,
tumbling down,
chased by a scooter.
Yeah, I was thinking that. I know. I'll roll down the hill. There'll be a scooter looming over me. This is what you get for making fun of people who drive scooters.
Is this your homework, Larry?
Wow.
I'll destroy your car.
But,
my God.
I'm very excited about our Kickstarter, and I wanted to succeed immediately because I want to go do this thing.
I do too. I mean, this is, people say, why are you guys, you're all very successful industry professionals, why are you doing a Kickstarter? It's because this is the only way for us to do something on this subject and not have it be ruined by notes. Like, oh, well, you got to really focus on the stars, and you got to focus on the Star Trek. We want to talk, part of this is going to be Curb Your Enthusiasm. It's following us around, as we, go to these locations,
these places that we've never been to,
and get into hijinks,
and we get lost.
Lots of shenanigans going on. Yeah, hijinks and shenanigans for sure. Yeah. And then of course we will dive into the episodes. But I think that to do this the way we want, we need to have the autonomy to do it the way we want to do it. And that's how I did 1982, and I think it turned out pretty damn well. And that's how we want to do this documentary about the great locations of Star Trek. And it won't just be DOS. We're going to be dealing with Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, Star Trek Picard Season 3. We're going to go to Lower Decks locations. Lower Decks locations, which is a sketching table in no, it's I told you, Ashley told me, he said, you really got to watch this Lower Decks because it's really good. And for a long time I was like, I don't want to watch it, but I watched it and I thought it was really good. So thank you, Ashley. I enjoyed it.
You're welcome.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
What have you done with Mark?
No, I'm just saying. Look, I'm just saying. Although they don't call it the Enterprise either, so that disturbs me.
That's true. On the other hand, it's like the Cerritos doesn't quite have the same ring to it, so maybe it's okay because it's like it could be the Cerritos Auto Center to like pull references.
Yeah, Pomona. It's the USS Pomona.
No,
Last Tango of Pomona.
Unexpectedly great.
Yeah, Darren's shaking his head. You can't see this on audio, but Darren's checked out. Darren's had enough of this conversation.
That's right.
Yeah. But
I think this is bad. Just wait until we're shooting the documentary.
Oh, it'll be bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're gonna have great guests. We're gonna have great guests as well. So I really hope that you'll show us some love on the Kickstarter, and we promise we will over deliver. what comes back will live long, and it'll be awesome.
Wow.
And if you don't, we'll double dumbass on you.
we know we have the best fans of the show, so we're counting on you.
That's right.
And we hope you'll come through, because we really want to do this, and we think it's going to be great. And I'm telling you, boy, what a great response we got to Deck 78 with Kenny Wall.
Yeah,
people loved that episode. That was nice, and he loved it. He was so appreciative, which was nice to hear, because obviously I'm a big fan of that show. I love when we can give back to the people that there's that show, The Toys That Made Us, the people that made us. It's like when we had Bob Butler on, or Kenny. It's just like all these people that were huge influences on us, who made us the people we are today, not to insult them. And it's so great. It's so great when we can give back and shine a light, because I always say this, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And so whenever we can look back at, whether it's people like Joe DaGusta, or a lot of people worked in this business, like David Burke, it's great. And that's why I like doing the show. But I only got a couple episodes left before season's over. So
that's right.
Got to make it count.
And then we're going to do a special on you.
Yeah,
that's right.
I told Darren, Ashley, I said for my last episode, when I stepped down, you should do a roast. You should, like a Friars Club roast. You should do an Altman roast.
We can start that right now if you want.
I know we actually do it all the time.
Yeah. Okay. You can just mispronounce every word.
That's right.
Yeah, but just make sure there's plenty of non-sparkling bottled water on hand.
Well,
Speaking of which, we showed the kids Free Enterprise last night. I could
oh
not.
My God.
Oh, was that rough? We could not. They've been bugging me forever about seeing it, and finally I had to give in, because when we record this, we're about to do a panel at Comic-Con on Free Enterprise, and they wanted to see it before they saw the panel, and it was interesting. It was very interesting. They said, "Wow, that Mark character is a real asshole." They said, "You're not as bad anymore," which was a nice compliment.
Anymore.
Yeah, exactly, anymore. They loved you, Darren. Oh my God, Darren got big laughs.
Well,
Darren is great in that movie.
Thanks.
Yeah,
I understand he's playing himself.
Well, you understand wrong.
Darren was not playing any version.
I was playing a crazed fan.
He's playing a crazed fan,
right?
Who was obsessed with Bill Shatner, and he did a wonderful job. I have to say, after watching the movie, I really enjoyed it. I haven't watched it in a long time. I really enjoyed it. I found it thoroughly entertaining.
It's a fun little moment.
Found it engaging.
Engaging.
Yeah, Ashley, you weren't around when we made that, but it was like a walk down memory lane. I saw so many familiar faces in it. I still crack up when I see Dan Mattson as Alexander. It's so wonderful.
Quietly breaks my heart that I missed that era, but it is what it is.
At least you didn't have to stay up all night.
That was a brutal couple of days. That was a brutal couple of nights. Those were night shoots, and we were shooting the party at the end, Mark's 30th birthday party, and Shatner's rap. And man, those were late nights. Plus, we couldn't find the cast. There was a strip bar across the street, and so we were looking for Eric and Sean, Patrick Van Horn, and Rafer and everybody, and we couldn't figure out where they were. Finally, one of the ADs said, "I bet they're across the street," and that's where they were. So
amazing.
Yeah, that was like
good times.
Yeah, good times were had by all. Then we couldn't find somebody else, and I guess they were all on Rob's trailer. God, doing what, I don't know. But
you don't want to know.
But it's funny, where you shot that? That was the old Chaplin stages, where Charlie Chaplin, but a Citizen Kane had shot part of the Citizen Kane there too.
Yeah.
So, as part of the documentary, are we going to visit Rob's trailer and have Rob just tell us all the things that happened in it?
I don't think Rob would remember. I don't think we want to know, because I think we still want to get an R rating. I don't think we want this to we got an R, or maybe it'll be like G, like Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
That's right.
My God.
I don't think with you it could be a G rating, Ashley.
No, I'm going to try to behave. Try.
Good luck with that. But it is difficult.
It is difficult. He put things in our bodies.
Maybe say things, tell lies.
All
Anyway, Okay, Darren's
Enough of
done.
this.
Darren wants us to go now.
Enough of this.
So anyway, what do we do? Social, right? We're on social at
Yes.
Inglorious Trek, or you can now find us on Instagram and Threads, and Instagram at
I'm not on Threads anymore, but
I'm not.
no, but Inglorious Trek is
Inglorious
Treksperts, actually. Inglorious Treksperts is on Threads and on Facebook.
Right.
Darren apparently is not, but if you want to follow me, I am.
Yeah, follow him.
And we're on Twitter and
In a
Facebook
scooter.
and on a scooter. Yeah, follow me on a scooter. Exactly. Son of a bitch. And you can rate us 5 stars wherever you listen to podcasts. And please, if you're interested in Deck 78, where we deal with Star Trek adjacent topics, you can subscribe at trekspertsplus.com. And of course, please go to Kickstarter and check out our page, or go to makethetrek.com to help us realize our dream of doing an epic documentary about the locations of Star Trek. So that's really about it.
Make-A-Wish Foundation. That's great.
Yeah, and don't miss us in Austin, Texas, where we'll be back with our good friends at GalaxyCon talking Trek. Now, it's going to be interesting because of the restrictions that SAG has given to their actors about what they can and can't talk about. So I got a couple of questions. I think that'll be just fine. Which I had for breakfast this morning.
Right.
What are you planning on having for dinner?
Right.
Well, you
What
said
kind
it
of booze you want
yourself.
for dinner? Yeah.
Just very well, Mark, that, we're kind of smugglers, it's like we start off the questions in the conversation about Star Trek and what have you, but really we want to talk about other stuff, so we'll just talk about the other stuff.
We'll just skip the Star Trek.
We'll skip the Star Trek.
We'll just treat it like an episode where we skip the Star Trek.
I know, but we
Talk about
can't ask
the
Terry Farrell about back to school again now.
Right.
Well, we can. It
Because
just-
when people
She
hear
just
that,
can't answer.
they're gonna run out to rent it and to buy it on. So like
her residuals
I mean,
are
this-
going to go through the roof.
I gotta tell you, some of these rules are nuts.
They're silly.
Like, I understand the picketing, and I understand, obviously there's certain things you can't do. But this whole idea that you can't talk about your career, you can't talk about things you've done in the past.
It's
is
silly.
ridiculous.
If it isn't funded by the studios,
Right.
then
That's one
it should
thing.
be okay.
I agree. Like Comic-Con, I understand why they don't want them going to a panel to support a movie they're doing now that the studio has brought them to. But if it's an autograph show where the money is going to the actor's pocket or a convention for the fans, that the studio does not benefit from. In fact, the studio actively works against.
Right.
It's ridiculous to say, oh, you can't talk about doing Star Trek, or you can't talk about.
It's like asking them to be on strike against themselves.
Totally.
Which is weird. And it's like, and if you have any sort of peek whatsoever, into the sort of the backstage of all of that with the convention thing, it's like so many of these actors, like the reason why, the convention circuit and convention tour is so important is like they do really well, man. It's like it's how they
because their residuals suck. They have to go
right.
through these conventions to make up for the lost residuals. So if anything, that's another reason they should be able to do it. And even the WGA isn't saying you can't talk about stuff you worked on. You just can't talk about stuff you're working on that the studio has
paying you to be there.
Has arranged. Yeah.
Right. So you can talk about like, I did the show and what it was like, everything like that.
Hopefully
Anyway,
things will be sorted out. And
we hope so. Gentlemen, as always, a delight and a pleasure to see you both. Another wonderful episode with Stephen Bingham. And I look forward to seeing you here again next Thursday at the appointed place for the Kuno Kalafi. So on behalf of Darren Ashley Miller and myself, Mark A. Altman, bang a gong and keep on trekking ingloriously, of course.